I have with me another powerful guest, but he is no stranger to the community, Obenfo Kambon. How are you doing tonight, warrior?
Habibi to me, Habibi Fahodia. I'm doing Black Powerful, Black Tastic, and Blacknificent.
Look, Obenfo, one of my comrades, shout out to Dr. Holly. He's over at University of Michigan. We're a part of a discussion. So it was basically Black Americans who repatriated, and then it was Ghanaians who were there, and everybody was kind of sharing their experiences and how they felt. And you had some Ghanaians were like, look, you all are coming here. We're leaving out because we're looking for jobs. But one thing you said, and you on there, and I said a lot, but it was one thing, there's multiple things that actually resonated with me, but it's one thing I'm gonna bring up. You talked about the power of language. And you expound on that, because I know outside of that, I mean, I know that was, the anecdote that you brought, the importance of that.
So it's interesting you bring that up, because that actually is what inspired me to go ahead and speak on the topic that I'll be addressing today. Before we even got on there, I showed them my Ghana card, my Ghana passport. I said, all of us are naturalized Ghanaians, but they decided that they'll get more airplay because of controversy. And I'm like, I've actually spoken on this before. If you look at every conflict on the continent, the major variable is not diasporans who've come back and thought that they were better. But all throughout the continent, what they all have in common is they have resources under the ground that these crackers don't want to pay for. If you look at southeastern Nigeria, it's oil. Again, Eastern Congo, that's what they refer to as coltan. Northwestern Niger is about uranium. So it's about that if you think that you're a fragment, you think your other people are fragments. Meanwhile, your enemy comes and say, y'all all look like one thing to me. Well, guess what? Guess who's going to laugh all the way to the bank? So that was the comments to that. You had so many people in the comments, they said, no one was stolen. Africans sold Africans. Nobody was stolen. Africans sold and I was like, wow, these got to be the most ignorant people on the face of the planet Earth, because I'm sure not a single one of them who said nobody was stolen has ever heard the name Antal Gonzalez. I'm sure not a single one of them has ever heard the name Nuno Cristal. I'm sure not a single one of them has ever heard the name Lancero de Freitas, and I'll go through who all of those are. If I mention that to them, they'll think that, oh, that's the new burrito at Chipotle. They'll think, oh, that must be something new on the Taco Bell menu. If I mention these names, then I'm telling you the ones who actually came up with the idea that we now know retrospectively as transatlantic enslavement. If they're going up on a heavyweight, championship fight, the primary sources are going to knock out the YouTube commenters
all the time, every time, Obenfo, every time. And it's crazy. You had Yvette Carnell and somebody else. I forgot the dude's name, but I know he's a lawyer. I think his name is Antonio or Tony. But they came together. They formed this organization called ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, right? They were trying to accomplish or achieve lineage-based reparations. So they were saying in order to do that, you had to delineate from just calling yourselves Black, right? Because if you just say I'm Black, then that connects you with Black folks in the Caribbean, Black folks, on the continent, and other Black folks, throughout the diaspora. So they came then Tariq Nasheed. He came up with the foundational Black Americans concept. So now that's taking movement. So now you have a bunch of Black Americans, and this could be just online, but I see a lot of it online. So you have a lot of Black Americans saying, look, we want to delineate. We want to delineate. We have been in America for 400 and 500 years. We've become our own ethnicity. Don't call me African nothing. I don't want to. They don't identify with their African brothers and sisters throughout the diaspora. So much so that the Essence Fest just took place. And a lot of Black Americans are making videos. They're saying they're upset because they're saying that the Essence Fest was created to celebrate Black American culture, not African culture or Pan-African culture, basically, or diasporan culture. They're saying that it was made for us and by us, and they feel like your thoughts. And I know this is going to tie into what we're going to talk about. This whole idea or this push now that Black Americans or foundational Black Americans need to delineate.
Well, first off, I'm not an advocate of reparations. I'm an advocate of retribution, which is what are we doing? For me, $1 million is not the payment for that. it's not about, for me, reparations. It's about retribution. So and I'm actually going to talk about this, thing that you're describing going on. But essentially, all of these things are, on cesspool media, because the ones who own the cesspool media platforms are the ones who make sure that the algorithm in blues keeps it going. Right. So we know for a fact that during COVID, if you said something about vaccines they didn't like, they would shut down the hashtag. They would shut down your account.
Absolutely.
Like that. Anything that they see is not in their interest, they can shut it down just like that. So you have to ask yourself, why are they not shutting down? I'm one fragment and I'm against another fragment. Why will they never shut that down? Because it works in their own interest to make sure that now, instead of Hutus versus Tutsis, or Bloods versus Crips, now they have the continental versus diasporan. And the same way that this is what got us into this position in the first place is, I think I'm one fragment and I think you're another fragment. I call myself, Asante. You call yourself Anglo. I call myself Yoruba. You call yourself, Fon. I call myself, end of the day, they're saying, get in the boat. Whatever you get in the boat.
Right, that part of info.
So let's go into the presentation, because when we look at classical Kemet, when we called ourselves Kemetiu, that translates to Black people. And we were most successful when we said, you know what, we're all Black people and we have common non-Black enemies, right? We were most successful in Haiti when we did the same thing. We were most successful in Jamaica when we said cleave to the Black, right? We were most successful when we decided, you know what, we're all Black people and we have common non-Black enemies, and we're going to whoop that non-Black behind. And our enemies know this. If we even get to the point of betrayal, we've gone beyond where we are right now, where we've been, because to even betray, it means I think we're all, one thing. So that's what we're going to go into. So this has been going on for at least 5,000 years, right? Of documented, recorded history. And my point is that we've done the best when we say, you know what, we have common ancestry, we have common descent, which translates to common interest. And on that basis, let's come together on the basis of that common interest in order to, fight, defeat our common enemies, right? In classical Kemet, we say we're all Black people, then we're doing quite well, right? Okay, so this is the presentation, Africans, Soul Africans, and the Slavery and Other Fairy Tales That Keep Quote Unquote White People Safe. This is what, the FBA, ADOS people think, when they say, oh, Africans, Soul Africans, and slavery. Like, here's one guy, I'm an African. Here's another guy, I'm an African too. And, the crack was just walking by, window shopping. He didn't have anything to do. Like, hey, I have something for sale. Oh, what is it? Oh, it's an African, right? So this is what they have in mind, right? Oh, I'm not doing anything with my child. Here's an African. So, if you want, I just have them for sale. Like, we're just sitting in the bush somewhere, who knows where. And, we're bored. We don't have anything to do. We're just like, oh, let me go sell. And now I'll go into a definition of anachronism, a person, thing, or idea that exists out of its time in history, especially one that happened or existed later than the period being shown. And they were the first ones to kidnap Black people. So everybody who's like, no one was stolen, no one was stolen, no one is stolen. I'm just saying, that tells me you've never heard the name Antal Gonzalez. You've never read the Chronicle of Acts in Guinea. And we'll look at all of that.
Yeah, and Obenfo, like they said, it's primary sources for this information. But go ahead, I'm listening.
Yeah, but YouTube commenters aren't interested in primary sources. They're interested in keeping crackers safe, right? And that said, you know what's easier? Let me go and beat up on some other Black people, right? So that's really what's at the core of it, is that they don't want to confront the crackers. They don't want to deal with retribution. At best, they want to beg crackers for money. So, they're hiding behind all these other narratives of FBA, ADOS, blah, 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 blah. Let's go straight into it. So, again, the rationale for the presentation is actually that DW Street debate that you saw. The phrase African Soul Africans is an anachronistic fairy tale. So, transatlantic Mangamizi disaster began with direct, quote unquote, white raids and kidnapping. Antal Gonzalez in 1441 marks the precedent, and we'll look at the primary sources where it's actually documented, where quote unquote whites came ashore specifically to capture Black people, not to trade. This is to the point, because some people in the comments were like, oh, I can't come to Africa because Africans, so Africans. Well, I say, well, guess what? If you can't come to Africa because of selling, how can you stay in the place of selling?
Come on, that part.
Initiating, ensuring, justifying pseudoscientifically, legally, religiously, not Katholika. Well, I guess you just got to hop in right into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Exactly.
And then this is the anachronistic part that absolves crackers. So, people act like the crackers were just, playing volleyball on the beach. And then someone, came up and said, "Hi, I'm an African. I have these Africans for sale." And then they were just saying, well, we didn't even conceive of that. But fortunately, we have some ships that are just outfitted specifically for transporting all of these people like sardines. So I guess we just lucked up. I'm glad these things are anachronistic, but we'll show you what actually did happen, which is kidnapping. And it wasn't until much later under Correa de Souza that they found out a way that they were going to try to get Black people to enslave other Black people. Berlin Conference, this is where you actually not only have a common identity, and these are crackers who are at each other's throats, but they said, you know what, the problems we have amongst each other never supersede the problems that we have against all these Black people. We're not inviting them to the table. You call yourself German, you call yourself Italian, you call yourself American. Mm-hmm. And yeah, America was at the Berlin Conference, for anyone who was wondering. Russia was also at the Berlin Conference, as was Turkey. All these crackers said, you know what? We're not only going to say that we all have something in common, we're going to operationalize that common identity. And we're going to do that to the detriment of all these quote unquote Africans. And meanwhile, we're still to this very day, like, I'm a fragment, you're another fragment. The stuff and crackers are laughing. They're like smacking their knees, laughing all the way to the bank because they say, you know what? All of y'all are enemies to me.
When I came out with Meltrek episode 3, white folks was in my inbox. You all sold yourselves. We were on the coast. You all brought your people to us. We never went into. We just stayed on the coast. We never went inside. My viewers know that I've always talked about this particular book, The Portuguese in West Africa, 1415 to 1670 by Mela Nuit. And a lot of what Mela Nuit did was translate the Portuguese writings, their letters, their diary entries, all of that is in here. And they say exactly what you just said. They talk about kidnapping. They talk about raiding. They talk about burning down some of those cultural places within.
Imagine if you knew anything, you would at least hedge. You would say, well, maybe some were stolen, but they're saying no one was stolen, right? And this is what I'm talking about. These are the fairy tales that keep crackers safe. So let's say all you Black people are ready to go and bang on these crackers, but here comes Stinker Smell, right? With a fairy tale, waving the wand and say, y'all sold each other. Okay, well, let's go and shoot these bullets at each other and let's leave these crackers unscathed. That's the point of the algorithms that make sure that type of these fairy tales are designed to make sure that you don't whoop that cracker behind. Because if you knew that they were kidnapping and raiding, well, what you need to do, retribution, not reparations. Even this, when I talk about anachronistic, even when you get to the point of a fragment fighting another fragment, it's a good 200 years in, just about 200 years into enslavement, before they decided to come up with a method to get a fragment to fight against another fragment. Before that, they were exclusively raiding. But again, they came up with an innovation of how we're going to do this. And I'll go to the primary source for that as well. This is my research question. Do the primary sources agree with YouTube commenters?
No.
The number of self-identifying Africans. No, you haven't read primary text. As soon as you said no one was stolen, I know that you've never read Chronicle. And in 1441, Altar Gonzalez, that's the name I've mentioned. The young captain of a small vessel dispatched by the Infant Don Enrique of Portugal to take on a cargo of seal skins and oil, put ashore a landing party on the coast of northern Mauritania for the express purpose of capturing Blacks. After light skirmishing, one Black male and one Black female were taken prisoner. So shortly after, he was joined by Nuno respectively as transatlantic enslavement, as written in archaic Portuguese. It says, "O que formosos, oh, how fair a thing it would be if we who have come to this land for a cargo of such petty merchandise," referring to the seal skins and oil that they were sent for, "were to meet with the good luck to bring the first captives before the face of our prince." Right? Published in 1460, Paris, France, courtesy of Bibliothèque Nationale de France. And you can see the lamentable story of one of the first landings of Negro captives from West Africa on the beach at Lagos in August 1444. That's not Lagos like Nigeria, by the way. By Lancelot de Freitas. Division was made of the proceeds of that expedition, including 240 captives, and the latter were apportioned among the ship's captains, the Amadors, and the navigator prince himself. right? In 1453, this is talking about what happened just 9 years earlier, 1444, Lanzo de Fretes. And we're going to start here. Viram ir nove moros y moras, right? So they saw, 9 Moors, which is what they referred to them, and more. So this is male and female.
In 2014, down in Atlanta, Georgia, I was debating, and I'm not going to say his name. He's been making videos about me for the past 11 years.
So this is the thing. There are a lot more fools than there are wise people, and if that wasn't the case, we would be in a different condition as a people. So just the very fact that you have 2,000 plus people in comments who are saying no one was stolen, everybody was enslaved,
everybody was sold.
This tells you the level of foolishness that we have, and if we didn't have that number of fools, then we wouldn't be in the condition that we're in right now. But they're fools not because they want to be fools. They're fools because the one who made them fools benefits from their foolishness.
Absolutely.
So I've begun to get a fragment to fight against another fragment. So again, 1510, King Ferdinand should have given authority for first 50 slaves to go to Hispaniola for the benefit of the mines. They had to be the best and strongest available. This is interesting that in Ghana, they have another fairy tale to keep crackers safe, that, it was only the criminals who got enslaved. But meanwhile, that's not what he's saying. He said they wanted the best and strongest available, right?
Come on.
Allion. In 1526, Lucas Vasquez de Allion. And we're going to do a decade of our repatriation. We're calling it